There's no one correct way to do it. It very much depends on what car you're driving. These two traces that I have here, again, we'll dive in some of the common things that I see wrong with a lot of traces out there as well. But this white trace, obviously a little bit too aggressive on the throttle as a whole. So he tries to get to maximum power really early, realizes right here, oh crap, I can't do that. Big oversteer moment because in the middle of the corner, full steering lock, has to get out of it. And then, you drop throttle, get back in it. But at that point, you've lost that extra drive from this little split second on power just a bit too early. But the red trace is another interesting trend that I see a lot. And you can also see that present in the steering here too. So they got it even earlier than the white trace, but keep it on 20%, 20%, 20%, then start to gradually bleed into it about right here. That does the opposite of what the white trace does. So where the white trace is almost shocking the car into a big oversteer reaction, putting a ton of, wheel spin in the car when you have maximum load on the steering wheel. At this point, you have a decent amount of steering in the car. You put a little bit of throttle in, and that shifts your weight to the rear. So now all of a sudden your nose is pitched up a little bit. You have less load on the front tires. That's inducing more understeer. So you can see the steering trace actually goes from, pretty reasonable amount. I mean, pretty good point for steering right here. The point where they have to increase, another 20 degrees or so because they've induced so much understeer. Now they can't make it out of the corner. Stuck understeering, and then it takes them even longer to get to full power.
Yeah. So this is a super important point because we see this obviously on the bike side a lot as well as the car side, which this in some ways you've got your white trace potentially late and abrupt with the throttle. And then you've got maybe the guy in red was maybe he didn't have the car quite pointed as well as it needed to be. So this goes back to how data engineers or even driving coaches look at data and reconcile whether it's a car issue or a driver issue. Because when you reconcile the throttle graph versus the steering graph, you're like, oh, car wasn't in the right spot. So that's something you're like, you automatically be like, okay, look, we need to talk about where your car placement is in that particular area. And the other guy maybe could be his eyes are late. He's aggressive with the throttle. Like he's like, oh crap, there's the exit. I'll get after it. And then it was too much or whatever it might be. So those are some of the things on how we recognize the driver/rider inputs.
Absolutely. There's always more to the picture too. I mean, you could even, like you're saying with the placement, well, we could recognize that here with the red trace where, all right, they turned in more earlier. So they're getting to the apex sooner. And therefore they're not able to get the car pointed as better as, not saying the white trace is doing the perfect thing here by any means, but they're not able to get the car pointed as well as maybe a driver that has a later turn in too. They're stuck even further inducing that exit problem where they can't even get to throttle, at the right point either. In an ideal world, right, maybe this white trace is on throttle a bit too aggressive too late. Like to start in between these two, right? And just gradually feeding in that throttle depending on what car we're driving. So we're not at full power as soon as the white is, or at least it's trying to be. We're on nice and smooth as we build up throughout the acceleration zone.